Is it logical to start including the process of AI into your dating life? Now might feel slightly more illogical. In 10 years' time,
it might feel more logical.
I suppose if I could piece them together, imagine, you have your little checklist and then out pops this.
Well, not even your checklist, right? You allow it to develop the checklist based on all the data that it's gathered on you so far.
Yeah, I mean, think of it with dating, right? While you're dating, you're talking to a few people in between. You know those people aren't your people, but like the temptation, the validation, the companionship, whatever it is, you're like, oh, I'll just talk to them for another week or 10.
A revolution is a fundamental and relatively sudden change in political power. An organization which occurs when the population revolts. This is the Marco Martins Revolution, powered by Vodcast TV. Visit vodcasttv.com for more.
At some point, I really must introduce you. This is Dani Donald. Thank you so much for joining me on the Marco Martins Revolution. Dani is a speaker, very much not a motivational speaker, although if you do feel motivated after one of the speeches or talks or seminars or however they're described, then goodie.
Yeah, I suppose the motivation would come from learning something that would then bring a sense of clarity or understanding to yourself or the world around you. So I suppose naturally that would bring a sense of motivation.
But yeah, motivational speaker is super gross. We were talking before we started here about, I suppose, it's a hot button topic at the moment, especially with the political climate here in South Africa, now slowly starting to replicate a bit of the North American political climate that we've seen growing over recent years. That's being called woke ideology or ideological leftist thinking, all of these sort of negative connotations to the modern day liberal, which is deemed as illogical. And it's something we were talking about beforehand.
Yeah, we actually had a great conversation around, because we were obviously throwing around words like, is it logical or is it illogical? And what came from that was, but what does logic mean? What does it mean to use the word logic? Because language is really important, right? We all use the same language, but it's very subjective. So when I say motivational speaker, what does that mean to me? It's a very different experience to the next person. Same as when you say the word woke, you say the word logical.
But the concern with that is, and it's fun to play these sort of thought games or definition games and things, is that we live in a social system, in a social society, and it's a growing social society with the world being more and more connected. Your social connection is with further and further spread out people from more spread out cultural histories, from more spread out religious backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds change as you grow out wider and wider, and that society is getting larger, and the definition of what norms to live within in that society is now starting to merge and meld a little bit. And we're finding ourselves in positions of extreme difficulty with that, where you're seeing, let's use the term, I'm going to get hate for this, but anyway, like Queers for Palestine, right? Is you've got this two seemingly contrasting perspectives or thoughts, which would be deemed illogical, is that you've got people from the queer community supporting a group that is fundamentally against a lot of what you live by. So how you define yourself literally as queer, that's the first word, Queers for Palestine, is extremely against the ideology of the people that you're now supporting. But is that illogical? Because you have a bunch of people who are fighting for the rights of who they see as a marginalized group.
And I suppose logic comes down to your personal frame of reference. So in that example that you gave, it would come down to the philosophy of the people that are supporting other people. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, the thing is, it's illogical because it's contrasting views from a side that you're picking. So you're picking sides instead of the idea of, hey, even though I'm a queer person and I think that the people of this side have a lot to learn or have a lot to change in their ideology in terms of fundamental queer perception, I feel like they are the marginalized and wronged group in this specific conflict.
Yeah. And I suppose in all of that, the philosophy would then be around supporting those that are marginalized.
Right.
And then that becomes logical.
And that seems to be the idea of woke ideology in North America, right? Completely. Is like whoever's losing, whoever's the underdog, whoever's marginalized in any way, they're right. And the big bad straight white man who's behind the cloak and dagger of everything is wrong all the time, always, end of story.
And that's why I said then that thinking does become logical, because then if those marginalized people are supporting other marginalized people, that philosophy to them is logical. And that's why earlier I challenged the idea of logic and reason, because it is still subjective.
Right. But I think that the traditional view of logic, anyone can see where the contrast in those perspectives could be deemed illogical.
Yeah.
Because it's irrational to be supporting the side of the person who would vilify you the greatest.
And I suppose also logic is from a set of evidence over a long period of time. So then at what point does logic start to change because that evidence starts to change? So like now we were speaking about AI again earlier around, is it logical to start including the process of AI into your dating life? Now might feel slightly more illogical. In 10 years' time,
it might feel more logical.
Yeah.
Well, again, right, logic is almost traditionally how I've perceived logic is almost more mechanical, right? More machine-like, more robotic, more computer code is always going to be more logical than a human being, because creativity is not inherent in its programming, or emotion is not inherent, and therefore logic is the opposite of emotional decision-making. It's logical decision-making. It's removing emotion from the decision-making process. So from a logic standpoint, a good artificial intelligence relationship that is sort of developed and prepared specifically for you is logical. But psychology will teach us otherwise, because psychology will say that with the lack of challenge in that relationship that would come from having a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a non-binary partner that is developed for you specifically based on the data set that is presented to an artificial intelligence model, does not present enough conflict to make a good relationship, because a good relationship might be deemed by some as something that helps you grow, and that might require some conflict in it, right? So again, psychology teaches us that that may be illogical, even though it's easy and good.
But if the underlying, like the crux of any good relationships, a relationship that makes you feel valued and worthy and loved.
Really? What's that like?
Yeah, I hear about these things. If that's like the underlying idea of a good relationship, then would it be logical for me to invest my time and energy into a chatbot, an AI-generated relationship that makes me feel valued, understood, like I belong, that helps me grow, because ultimately I'm experiencing a positive experience of myself and this conversation that I'm having with said being? Would it then become logical?
Sure. I mean, and then again, I think that the only argument against that at that point is that you're now in an echo chamber of ideas that will just reflect back the same positive reinforcement to all of your ideas, whether they're good ideas or bad ideas. It's sort of crafted to just give you those values, just the values that you had set out for your relationship at the beginning, is that I want to be heard, I want to be validated, I want to be cared for, I want to feel these sort of feelings. And then it starts removing the other things that perhaps are equally important is challenging your ideas, challenging your beliefs, and removing you from those echo chambers that we know psychologically can be so dangerous, is that you can develop some sort of self-righteous complex of always being right. And I think that is where I'll take us back to the idea of the definitions of logical and rational thinking, is that I don't think that you can be a logical or rational thinker ever if you are strict on your stance of anything. So if you're any opinion of yours should be swayed by rational argument, right? You should feel prepared to move your position on any individual subject if you're presented with the right information. And I think that stubborn stance on your ideological thinking is dangerous. And we now see it more so on left woke, liberal ideological thinking, more and more so than what we saw when I was perhaps coming up in the 90s, where that was more the scientific community was in the liberal, and they were the old-fashioned, nerdy, logical thinkers, is that present me with the data, I will make my position based on that data, and remove themselves from any sort of ideological belief. The only ideological belief that they perhaps had would be the scientific method, which in itself is logical.
Yeah.
You know, is that the ideology of using the scientific method allows you to be free of ideological thinking in a way.
Yeah. But again, if we go back to evidence and history, right? So I think there's very little evidence in history around a lot of these ideologies because they're all new and the experiences of them are all relatively new, or at least the storytelling component of them is new, because maybe people have been, no, not maybe, definitely people have been experiencing these things for years to
like
themselves.
Gender identity.
Yeah, but they are only now really expressing them. So the evidence publicly, historically, is little.
Yes, and I think you have to go so far back for any historical evidence of gender identity and things changing, is that it was oppressed by religious ideology. So you see this huge increase in gender identity, fluidity, and things like that as the fall of Babylon, the end of the great Greek empires, the end of the great Roman empires. And I think this is the historical fear that people are having now, is looking at modern societies on the brink of collapse, because the evidence historically seems to represent that when you have more of this freedom of gender in terms of decision making, that becomes the fall of the empire. We saw it at the end of the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, and things. I'm not trying to make the argument that it's like, oh, this is such a bad thing, like gender identity politics is such a bad thing that this is going to mean the fall of the empire. I think that you're in a dangerous position when you say that and people are like, good, this empire must fall. It's like, hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on. Are you sure? Are you sure you want this empire to fall? Like, things aren't that bad. Are they that bad?
I suppose ultimately anything just comes down to that we fear what we don't know. So if my entire reality is based on this frame of reference I have, right, the evidence, the history, my own subjective views, if I don't have any frame of reference to compare this to in history, obviously I'm going to be scared because I can draw parallels or similarities to past things, but it's not the same. So of course I'm going to be scared and stubborn and unable to shift my perspective because I've got no frame of reference.
Right. So communism and socialism and Marxism is bad because it's never worked before in the past.
Or it never looked like this.
Right. Exactly. And that's the argument, right? Is that socialism is good. It's just not worked yet.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And I think that perhaps we're at a better time to see these things come to a more positive fruition than ever before because of the changes in technological advancement, right?
Yeah.
Where artificial intelligence, like, hey, artificially intelligent daddy, please look after us and tell us what to do.
Yeah.
It might just be the system for a more coherent, peaceful society looking forward. From a logical standpoint, maybe like make all our decisions for us based on the large data set. Okay. Maybe a Marxist system does work best for people because there'll be less suffering, there'll be less poverty, there'll be less hunger, and there'll be more opportunity for human beings to feel more fulfilled and enriched. But perhaps once again, that lack of conflict might be what undoes us all, is that we're giving up the one very thing that makes us human, is the idea of autonomy. right?
Yeah.
And that's the scary thing. And again, with the relationships, right, is that it's like, if you lose so much faith in the ability to have romantic partnership with another human being, are you neglecting yourself?
Yes.
Does it take you into a position of such a weak position of self-esteem? Because just by agreeing to the logical decision of having a relationship with an AI who's not going to cheat on you, who's not going to lie, who's not going to challenge you,
meet your needs.
and they meet your needs in a far greater way than any human can. They understand you sexually, emotionally. They understand you in all of these ways in a way that a human being can't, because they haven't been presented with that data set, and they have their own biases, which the artificial intelligence doesn't. What is the sacrifice by agreeing to that? And the sacrifice is that your faith in human beings, and therefore yourself, is so damaged because you've put your faith into technological something that's less tangible.
And I suppose, what does that do for that individual in the collective and society, right? Does it make them a better functioning component of society? So let's say you get an individual who is now, their needs are met, they feel loved, they feel valued. Does that make them higher functioning in society because they have these needs met? Or does it make them less so because, like you say, are they being validated in this echo chamber? Are they now not socializing like they normally would? You know, because if generally speaking, if you're feeling lonely or isolated and you're craving that sense of interaction, you have to find some courage or energy within yourself to then put yourself out there to meet someone. But if you don't have to do that anymore, and then does it just further isolate you?
Right.
And then you lose those social skills.
You don't have to look after how you look. You don't have to take better care of how you dress. You don't have to take better care with how you structure sentences. You don't have to work on charm, flattery,
and like said,
all of these traditionally normal human social skills that we develop, the courting stuff, right? And which is a survival skill set.
Yeah, and like you said about conflict, right? So rejection plays a role in forming our identity. So what is my ability and my capacity to overcome rejection? As you were saying earlier about building your self-esteem. So if I am actually never being rejected, and I'm never being abandoned, and I never have to regulate that within myself, what does that mean for me developing, my psyche developing?
Well, we have some evidence in psychology with coddled child syndrome, right? Is the child who's completely coddled suffers greatly with self-esteem issues because they've never had to face any of these barriers or adversity that actually generates the self-esteem that you're trying to protect as the coddling parent, right? Is you're trying to protect your child from trauma and self-esteem issues and not allowing them to build the self-esteem in the first place. Yeah. Which is the difficulty in that.
And then there's also the other way of using AI with dating, right? So it's not just the idea of dating an AI person, but using AI to come up with your dating profile. So you're putting a version of yourself out there that's not actually you. So it's like a whole new way of catfishing someone. But the way that you articulate yourself, the information that you put out there, the way that you describe yourself they're not your words, it's not you. So it might be speaking about you, but it's not how you would present yourself in the world.
And perhaps it's presenting you differently to each individual person in future, right? Going forward. So having a profile on Tinder, which is one single profile that is put out to every person on the Tinder network. But what if I asked AI to change my profile for each person viewing it, making me more appealing to each individual person based on the data that you've gathered on each one of those individuals, right? So that's even more terrifying, is that this person feels like a really good fit for me. Well, of course they do. AI has written their profile in such a way based on my data that they've had access to, which is not a far-flung thought when you think about Meta's access to AI, right? Is that Meta has access to all of your information, your conversations, your profile, etc. So technically, Meta could build a dating profile for me to be most appealing to Miss Dani Donald, for example, when we interact on Instagram. And AI can give me a lot of tips and tricks and things in order to, which now starts to look like manipulate you into thinking that I'm a perfect partner for you.
Yeah. But I mean, that's dating though, right? We tend to put our best foot forward. You kind of chameleon to the person in front of you.
But how good we are at that is is a human thing, right? So the person with the best social skill set is often the one who's going to have the most relationship success, right? And let's take it to evolutionary biology, for example, which is a science that is greatly argued because it's probably one of the least woke and modern social sciences and studies, is that it takes us back to our inherent evolutionary biological needs and wants and desires, and simply places that as reasoning onto our modern day social behavior. And I think the most obvious version of that is value systems, right? So a woman's historical value system was her ability to breed. So wide hips, child-rearing hips, that's sexually appealing. Large breasts, sexually appealing, able to feed many children, and an athletic physique, able to take the children away from any sort of danger. Men's value system has always been their ability to provide, which used to be provide security and provide food. Now that means make enough money to provide security, provide food, So these are a very base level evolutionary psychological definition for people choosing their mates. But there's a lot more to that, right? So if we look at physical appearance, like clear skin and symmetry have universally been perceived as attractive traits.
Yeah.
So that seems to be something that human beings just value in terms of physical appearance. But we've also developed social skills over time to make us have better opportunities in mating, in finding a partner, better romantic opportunities, and charm, humor, these sort of skills that you work on in order to have a better opportunity. And sometimes manipulation is one of those tools.
Sometimes, I think a lot of the time.
A lot of the time, manipulation is one of those tools.
But that's human nature, right? I mean, that's just our personalities develop in that way, right? Because our personalities are these really intelligent defenses that essentially it's like having training wheels on your bike when you're a kid. They serve you in your younger years. The only thing is we're all now just adults going around with our training wheels on. So I think manipulation is a huge part of dating. But what's so interesting for me is in all of this, right? So whether it's just your typical dating apps now, there's always this third emerging force, let's call it, that comes from anything. So let's develop a dating app so it gives people greater access to other people. Potential partners. So it feels like a 1 + 1 = 2 thing. But it never works that way, in that there's always something that emerges from it that you didn't expect. So like with Hinge and Tinder and Bumble and all these apps now, it's just become another addiction and another social media platform that you scroll on when you're bored.
Because what's the value proposition? The value proposition for the consumer is to find that romantic relationship that's meaningful. That's the attraction. But that's not the value proposition for the creator of the application.
Yeah.
The value proposition is profit.
So they're not, I mean, think about how
motivated are they to help you find a partner, or they're extremely motivated to convince you that this is the way that you find a romantic partner, because that creates the user. But if you do find a romantic partner, you stop using my application and you're a customer gone.
Because I mean, Hinge's slogan is designed to be deleted or something like that. But how many people do you know that use Hinge that are on regularly, and they go on in cycles? So they're on and then they're off for 2 months and then they're on, and it actually just becomes a part of your mental habit, right? So like when I'm bored at work or when I'm stuck in traffic, I pull out my phone and then it's Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Hinge.
Sure, lots of validation seeking there.
And then you go boom, 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 and you kind of almost do your like little routine, and then you close your phone again. So how many people these days, particularly that dating apps are so common and they're now the norm, you're not really using it to find your partner.
You're using it for that moment
validation,
of validation,
the addiction, the habit. Interesting.
Yeah. So what's AI's role in changing that? Like, is it really... we haven't gotten into the political stance of artificial intelligence and technology yet, but I think AI's role in that relationship is that it's a quicker, faster way to get that validation, and you'll require it to a greater extent, because what we spoke about earlier is the self-esteem, right? Is that the low self-esteem is what makes the addiction so much stronger is that need for validation
Yeah.
when the self-esteem is weak and poor. And social media is more successful in keeping young people's eyes on those screens. And they've grown up in the social media world where they haven't had access to normal interaction or non-technological interaction in the way that we did growing up. So perhaps psychologists believe that their self-esteems are less developed than those of people who grew up without social media, without technology, ruining the ability to grow that self-esteem or develop that self-esteem rather. So as AI becomes more introduced into it, and it's the more comfortable, the more easy choice, the less difficult choice, means that the self-esteem takes a greater knock, and therefore the addiction and the need for validation becomes even higher and greater. And you'll always get that from the artificial intelligence. So you're creating this like matrix-like world where you just sort of want to be locked into it. You accept the removal of your normal human requirements, your normal human needs and wants and desires. You'll be prepared to sever that in the idea of comfort.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a path of least resistance. But I think it's inevitable, right? That it is already, but it's going to be more of a part of dating life. But I don't think it'll be as isolating as we think it's going to be. And that's that emerging force thing that we can't even begin to guess what it's going to look like. So we can't fathom what it's going to look like. But I mean, if you have your AI generated partner who can walk around, you know, and sit at the dinner table with you and your family, and then it's become an accepted norm that's just what dating is like. And then your physical, I mean, think of like sex dolls and things these days. I mean, it's like
robotics will catch up.
Scary.
Yeah, robotics will catch up with artificial intelligence, right? That's what the natural progression we imagine to come from it.
So if the IQ and some version of EQ is there and the physical presence is there, and like you said, the robotics and then like the sex doll, the flesh element. I mean, sex dolls these days are ridiculous and how apparently
laugh like they
are.
Yeah.
I'm not talking from experience. And then what if that just becomes the norm? So is it going to be as isolating as we think it is? Because it's now the norm. It's how you date. So it's like, oh, is your partner Italian, South African, or AI? It's just going to be a category of one person to interact with.
So I don't have the study off the top of my head, but I think it'll be easy enough to Google where people's interactions during COVID over Zoom were reflective of a normal interaction to an extent from a neurochemistry standpoint, right? So where they did a study on the effects of the neurochemistry of a Zoom call. So it almost manipulates the mind into thinking that you're interacting with a person on a normal level, but there are missing components to it, and people feel more and more isolated because the Zoom call is mimicking a normal interaction, but people still have a deep knowledge of that is not a normal interaction. And I think that Meta brought this up with their virtual reality or augmented reality, is that you'll have a more realistic interaction. So like the international boardroom meeting, right? So for the person who's in Spain, having a meeting with someone in the United States, the Zoom meeting wasn't good enough. And I think this was part of Mark Zuckerberg's pitch into the metaverse, right? Is that you put on a headset and I will have an android of myself or an avatar of myself in the metaverse, and we'll be interacting in a more psychologically realistic manner. But I think that still is going to fall short in terms of being able to manipulate our brains. I think we'll always know that there's something until it becomes indistinguishable from reality. And I'm not sure if that's the physical element of like robotics or if we're just going to submerge ourselves into a reality of virtual reality, like a headset that has haptic feedback, etc., rather than actual normal physical interaction.
And I think that gap, like you say, we're still going to be sensing that it's not enough. That gap is never going to. I mean, think of any addiction that there is, right? Drugs, alcohol, sex, food. You know that is not whatever it is you're actually subconsciously seeking. You know it. But I mean, does that stop humans from engaging in any sense of addiction? No. So I think the idea that it's never going to quite be what we're seeking that's not enough to stop people from going down this road.
I think that the road is coming, right?
It's
here and it's inevitable in terms of where it's going. But I think the discussion is the harm more. Definitely. So that I think any logical, let's go back to that, any logical person would agree that there's a great potential for the harm of human society, of how we continue to conduct ourselves, let alone the decrease in breeding, in reproduction and things like that. It might be the end of human existence just because people don't want to reproduce anymore.
What about the benefit though? So I know as these discussions are becoming more and more common, because we are reactive beings, we're fear-based, we go to the harm, always, obviously. But it's inevitable. This road is, like we say, it's here. So I think it's less for humans, and for me, because of what I speak on is human behavior, my brain always goes to, it's less about the thing and it's more about your capacity to hold the thing, whatever it might be. So yes, as humans, we're going through so much in the world right now in various ways. But what is that doing for our capacity, our bandwidth, our ability to hold more difficulty or more adversity, or our capacity for lateral thinking, right? So if we're able to regulate ourselves better,
sure,
you know, so like our capacity is increasing. So if I say like the benefit is, I think if we allow ourselves to start speaking about the benefit of these things also, because it is inevitable. So fighting against it and resisting it consistently is actually, I think, going to do more harm than being like, you know what, this is the new reality. It's how do I coexist with it? So it's not this, all that, it's and. So it's my life and AI.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So I think as things stand now, I fully agree. I think that people are in a fear-based standpoint with AI, and they sort of put it behind them. They put some blinkers on and like hope that it doesn't exist, because if I don't see it, it can't hurt me. But I think from a business standpoint, absolutely, it has to be embraced completely. And I think the positive outlook on that, if you're trying to look more positively at the benefits of what AI will bring us, is that human beings currently in the current day workforce work tremendous number of hours, far more than what we have done in recent past, you know, is that, and I think that it might free up some human time as well as allow you to do more creative tasks in your daily work, which will be more fulfilling for individuals, for human beings, is that we can use AI as an assistant, as a tool to, in the same way that motor vehicles helped us, in the same way that the internet helped us. All of these things became tools in technological development to allow people to be more fulfilled and pursue greater things creatively. So I think that is absolutely coming and here already.
And the thing is, we don't know what we don't know. So I know that Henry Ford had said if you asked people what they wanted, they would have asked for faster horses.
Right.
So, but you don't try and outrun a car now. It's impossible. So I think that we can't even begin to fathom it, because like then asking for faster horses is just their natural next progression.
Right. So you're getting the AI boyfriend, Dani Donald? Romantic relationship with an artificial intelligent being?
Yeah, I suppose if I could piece them together. Imagine, you have your little checklist and then out pops this.
Well, not even your checklist, right? You allow it to develop the checklist based on all the data that it's gathered on you so far. But gathered on your WhatsApp conversations, your Instagram interactions, you know, not even just the pictures that you like on Instagram, but the ones that you perhaps linger on a little bit longer. And it's like, I find this interesting and fascinating, but I don't feel socially okay with leaving my name there on the like. Instagram or the AI would have access to that data. So it's like, oh, this is the sort of body that Dani Donald likes on things. Desire, at least on a screen, right? So this is what I'm going to put on a screen in front of Dani all the time, is that it's like blue eyes and this color hair and abs and a tan, you know,
that's
the guy that's going to be speaking to Dani every day and telling her how pretty she is and how much he loves her hair.
And just validates me all the time. Yeah. But I think this is where personality comes into play, because for me, the way my like temperament is, or my personality makeup is I not care too much what people think, but I'm very aware of how I'm perceived. So immediately where my mind goes first is, but what will people think if I'm dating? I have an AI boyfriend. Whereas for other personalities, it's not a thing. You know, their thing is more around safety and security, or it's more around impact and control. So I think also it will come down to the individual, as with anything, preference. And for me, I may be curious about the idea, but I don't think my temperament would allow me to even go there.
If you could do it completely in secret, alone, away from the world's gaze, and you could have a relationship with an artificial intelligent being, without the judgment of others, would you be curious to do the interactions at the very least?
I would be curious, but more from like I want to see what it's like.
Scientific stance more so than a thing.
From
like,
something I think
how
I'd actually
good
enjoy.
are you?
Yeah, like it would be cool to like test it out, but I don't think it would be something I would be pulled toward. I don't think I would feel satisfied in that. You know, we spoke about there's a part of you that knows that it's not real. I think that part for me would be a big hang up. I wouldn't be fine with that. And you?
Again, I think I'd be similar to you. I'd love to just see what the interactions are like, just from a curiosity standpoint, is how good an AI model is this, etc. And I think the furthest extent I would go with it is that I would perhaps use it as a marker of what I'm looking for in another human being, right? Is that it's like, perhaps AI will allow me to better understand myself and what my requirements are from a partner in order to seek out that partner, right? Perhaps the AI knows things about me and has been able to puzzle together some of my data to present me with, hey, this is more the sort of person that you should be looking for than the ones you've looked for historically.
Okay, so you get presented that ideal person. How easy is it then going to be to be like, okay, well, it's there-ish.
Don't you find that you've had data after a failed relationship?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right. So is this not the same thing?
But
it gives you a clearer.
This one, because I mean, you've got your perfect woman in front of you.
Well, I'm just saying that perhaps you're presented with more data, right? Perhaps it just allows you a little bit more of a, listen, you've been down the wrong path, and this is why. Like just a little bit of a eye opener as to what, like, you're looking for people who behave this sort of way because perhaps it's something that you thought would make up the ideal partner. However, perhaps you actually like someone who's more ambitious.
But if you're then presented with the ideal, it's not just information and insight. Right. It's okay, you've been doing this. Actually, what you need is this, and here it is. Won't that be so tempting to be like, well, you know, just for a week. Like, I'm just going to, let me just
date
like
the actual ideal.
Let me just like for a week, but then I'll go back to real life.
Oh, sure. I think the danger is there, absolutely.
I mean, it's so tempting because it's right in front of you.
If you try it for a week and it's amazing, are you going to stop?
And then every other person you meet sucks.
The sort of discipline that would require.
That's the thing, right?
That would require immense discipline to not be sucked in. I mean, there was the film Her. Joaquin Phoenix has a relationship with artificial intelligent being and really deeply falls in love with the artificial intelligence. And then has the sense that the artificial intelligence is deeply in love with him and feels betrayed when he learns that the same large language model or whatever that he's in a relationship with is in a relationship with other people, and then feels betrayed by it.
Yeah.
Right? So fascinating.
Absolutely
and I think there's no doubt that a person of the normal level of discipline in life would absolutely fall into that temptation and continue the relationship down the line if it's a fantastic 1 week relationship with artificial intelligence.
Of course. I mean, think of it with dating, right? While you're dating, you're talking to a few people in between. You know those people aren't your people, hypothetically speaking. You know those people... a person. You know those people aren't your people, but like the temptation, the validation, the companionship, whatever it is, you're like, oh, I'll just talk to them for another week or 10.
Sure.
Hypothetically speaking.
You're under no obligations to stop speaking to those people, right?
Exactly.
I love that as a term. I wasn't obligated.
Oh, no one told me.
No
I don't
one
have to do
told
that.
me. Yeah. Whereas human beings, we like to use those little literal definitions as excuses for poor behavior as well, don't
exactly.
we? Right?
Absolutely.
It's like I'll treat you in a way that I know is ethically wrong or morally wrong, etc. But I'll hide behind the wording or the definitions of I was not obligated to treat you in any other way because we had no clear relationship guidelines or ground rules or anything is set and established in writing before heading into this point in our interactions.
But I suppose that's just it, right? With everything we've said, it's just the world of blurred lines.
Right. And we love to push those blurred lines into our own individual favors, don't we?
Absolutely. Align it with our own frame of reference, always.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure blurring the lines with you, Dani Donald. I think that we need to have more conversations like this going forward.
Definitely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been an episode of the Mark and Martin's Revolution, brought to you by Vodcast TV, Johannesburg's premier shared podcast studio platform. If you've ever wanted to host a podcast like this for yourself or your business, now is the best time to do it. Head on through to vodcasttv.com/revolution now and get yourself a discount on your first order of a podcast or podcast series. For me, for now, it's goodbye.